I have a stubborn daughter, and I honestly thought the problem was going to be her attitude. That's what I told myself when I said she had to leave the basement suite. Not leave the house exactly, just move out of that part of it and into my wife's hobby room for a while so my son and his wife and the kids could have proper space. I thought she'd be angry, probably cold with us for a bit, maybe stomp around downstairs, maybe make some pointed comments about how much she already pays us. I was ready for that. I was not ready for her to take it exactly as I said it. That's the part that has been bothering me. Because I said move out of the suite, and she heard move out. And maybe that sounds ridiculous. Maybe it isn't even a distinction to anyone else. But in my head it was. The basement was one thing. The house was another. Family was family. Temporary was temporary. I had all these lines in my head that I guess only made sense to me. She's 27. She works hard. I know that. She does those 14 days out of town and then 7 off, sometimes fewer if schedules shift. She comes back tired, does her laundry, sleeps odd hours, buys groceries without announcing it, and sends us the same amount every month. 1,800 Canadian. Rent and food. I know exactly how much because it always hits on time and because, if I'm being honest, we got used to it. Faster than I should admit. That sounds bad written out like that. Like we were taking advantage. I don't think that's what it was, at least not the way people would probably read it. The suite isn't some luxury apartment. It's part of our house. The bed's ours. The furniture is ours. Half the stuff in there was cobbled together from rooms we changed around over the years. It always felt like an extension of the house, not this formal tenant-landlord arrangement. She was our daughter living at home and contributing. That's how I saw it. Maybe that was the mistake. Not the money itself, the way I was categorizing it. My son lost his job and called sounding wrung out. Not dramatic, just beaten. A grown man with 2 little kids trying not to sound scared and not quite pulling it off. The toddler had been sick. The baby was brand new. His wife was exhausted. Rent was becoming a conversation. He asked if they could stay for a bit, which in family language means nobody knows how long and everybody pretends they do. I said yes too quickly. I know that now. My wife started talking through logistics right away. The crib, boxes, where to put the stroller, and whether the basement was warmer or colder for the baby. And I went along with it because the basement made sense. Separate entrance, more room, privacy. It was obvious. The only obstacle was our daughter being in it, and I think this is where I really embarrassed myself without understanding it yet. I treated her like a scheduling problem. I told her that she'd need to move into the hobby room when she got back. She looked at me in this very steady way and said she didn't agree to that. I said it was our house. I said rules. The usual stupid thing a man says when he wants authority to do the work his thinking should have done. She didn't cry, didn't plead, didn't even really argue after that. That should have warned me. My daughter has never been a screamer. When she gets quiet, that doesn't mean she's accepted something. It usually means she's moved past the part where I still have input. She packed while we were asleep, or maybe before work, I don't know. Not much to pack, because most of what was down there wasn't technically hers. Clothes, laptop, personal things. She went back out to work like she normally does, and I figured we'd sort it when she came home. We moved my son and his family in. My grandson was thrilled by the stairs for about 6 hours and then started having meltdowns because nothing smelled right and the routine was different. The baby cried off and on through the night. My daughter-in-law looked like she was trying to make herself smaller in every room. My son kept saying, "Just till I'm back on my feet," but he said it in that vague way that makes you wonder if he's trying to reassure me or himself. Then the month turned. No transfer. My wife noticed first. She asked if maybe the bank was delayed. That's how normal it had become. We weren't even checking when it would come, just whether. She texted our daughter where the rent and grocery money was, and our daughter wrote back that she moved out. Not, "I'm moving," not, "I'm thinking about getting a place." She said she moved out, past tense, done. I called immediately because the nerve of it hit me before the logic did. I asked where exactly she thought she'd moved to. She said she'd booked an all-inclusive for her week off and that it cost less than staying with us had been costing her. She said it in this almost cheerful, practical voice. Room, food, cleaning, drinks, warm weather. Less than rent and groceries here. She'd run the numbers. I don't know why that made me so angry. It should have just sounded like a person making a decision. Instead, it felt insulting. Like she'd taken the whole family arrangement and reduced it to a spreadsheet and found us overpriced. I said this wasn't how family behaves. She said family also doesn't usually give away your room and then expect automatic payments from you. I asked if she really thought a resort was the same as a home. She said right now, for her, it actually made more sense. That stung more than I let on. Not because she was wrong exactly, because she said it without any shakiness, no guilt in it. None of that half-apologetic tone people use when they know they're breaking an expectation. She sounded like somebody ending a service they no longer used. Then she asked me how much I was charging her brother. That question has been sitting in my chest like a piece of gravel. Because the answer is nothing right now. Maybe later, when he's working, maybe when things settle, but nothing now, so the comparison was ugly, and I could hear how ugly it was the second she asked. She said she'd been paying $1,800 a month to live in a space we were willing to hand over the minute someone else needed it, and now suddenly we still expected the same money from her while she wasn't even there. She pointed out she's only home roughly half the month anyway, sometimes less. Then she asked again what my son was contributing. I tried to drag it back to principle. He has children. He's in a crisis. Families step up. But the truth is, I was scrambling because she had framed it in the only way that mattered, and I hadn't wanted to see it that way. She had been treating the arrangement like an adult financial exchange with family elements around it. I had been treating it like family first. My son called her after, and that went badly. He told her she was being selfish by not helping in a hard time. She asked where this sense of obligation was when he was employed and not sending us a dime. He told her he had his own family to support, which I'm sure sounded good in his head and terrible the second it landed. Apparently, he offered that if she came back, they'd move upstairs and she could have the basement again. That should have solved it, right? If the issue was just the room. But by then it wasn't. By then she'd already understood something I was still trying not to understand. That the space was only hers until one of us wanted it more, and the money was only appreciated as long as it didn't buy her any real claim. She sent $500 a few days later for groceries. 500, not nothing. Enough that I couldn't say she'd abandoned us completely. Also nowhere near enough. Not with another household basically dropping into the house. Formula, diapers, extra food, hydro, everything. I looked at that transfer and felt grateful for maybe 3 seconds before feeling furious all over again, because 500 felt chosen, measured. Like she had decided what level of help counted as kind without it becoming an obligation, and I hated that she got to be the one deciding now. That's the humiliating part I don't really want to admit to anyone in the family because it makes me sound smaller than I want to sound. It's not only that we need more money. We do. It's not only that 500 isn't enough. It isn't. It's that she figured out that she didn't actually need this house. I thought she'd be trapped by convenience, by loyalty, by habit, by the fact most of the furniture belonged to us. Instead, she walked away with a suitcase and a laptop, and apparently that was enough. Meanwhile, the son I rearranged the house for is downstairs, trying to reassure everyone with no job, 2 children, and a lot of "once I'm working again" promises. My wife is tired in a way that makes her short with everybody by 5 in the afternoon. The toddler has started pounding on the basement ceiling with a toy. The baby's sleep is chaos. Every grocery run feels like a small insult because I know exactly what used to quietly appear in the fridge before any of us had to think about it. And yes, I want her help. More than 500, more than beach photos and practical little explanations. I want her back in the house because money is one thing, but distance hardens people. If she comes back, there's still a chance to put things back into some shape I recognize. If she stays gone, then I have to deal with the possibility that I turned my adult daughter into someone who now sees us as a bad deal she was smart to get out of. I keep trying to make myself the reasonable one here. A father helping a son in trouble. A grandfather making room for babies. A man trying to keep a household running. All of that is true. What I can't stop hearing underneath it is something uglier. I thought she would absorb the hit because she always had before, and this time she didn't. A week later, the house still hasn't settled. It's louder, tighter, and more tired. My wife keeps asking whether I've spoken to our daughter again. I say not properly. That's not quite true. I've typed things and deleted them. I've thought about telling her plainly that the 500 isn't enough and that if she's going to call herself part of this family, she needs to do more. I've also thought about asking her to come for dinner, just dinner, and not mention money right away. But even that feels strategic in a way I don't like about myself, because I'm starting to understand that the next thing I say to her is going to tell her what I actually think she was to us. A daughter. Or income we got too comfortable counting on. And I don't know, if I'm honest, whether I've earned the answer I want. Follow-up. I'm the father from the original post. The one whose daughter moved out after we asked her to give up the basement suite for her brother's family. Some people asked for an update. I wasn't planning to write one, but things have not exactly settled the way I thought they would. If anything, the situation has gotten stranger, and I'm still trying to understand how we got here. The first thing I want to say clearly, because people online love to fill in their own stories, is that there was never favoritism in our house. Not growing up, not later. My wife and I treated both of our kids the same. Same rules, same expectations, same support when they needed it. Nobody was neglected, nobody was pushed aside, nobody was treated like they didn't matter. So when people talk like my daughter has been secretly mistreated all these years, I honestly don't understand where that idea even comes from. We fed them, clothed them, and put a roof over their heads. We helped them through school. We were always there. Which is part of why the whole thing still feels so baffling to me. Anyway, after the last time I wrote, she had sent the $500 for groceries and then went off to that beach resort during her week off. At the time, I thought maybe that was a one-time thing. She works hard. Maybe she just needed a break. But then a few weeks later, she posted pictures again. Another all-inclusive. Different place, same kind of setup. Sun, drinks, pools, and beach chairs. Meanwhile, in our house, my son is still unemployed. There's a newborn crying at night, a toddler who doesn't understand why his routine exploded, and grocery bills that feel like they doubled overnight. It's hard to look at those pictures and not feel like she's making a statement. My wife certainly took it that way. She told me it was obscene for our daughter to be sitting on a beach while her brother was struggling to support 2 kids. Her exact words were something like, if she cared about this family, she would cancel those trips and come home. At first, I thought that was too strong. But the more time passed, the more I started feeling the same irritation. Because we're not asking for luxury from her, we're asking for some solidarity. My wife eventually called her and told her straight that this vacation thing needed to stop while her brother was going through such a hard time. Our daughter didn't yell, she didn't even sound upset, she just said she had already paid for the trip and that she was going. Then she repeated the same stuff, that she had done the math and it still cost her less than what she had been paying to live at our house. I told her that framing it like that was insulting. We are not a hotel, and that's when she used the word tenant. She said that if we were going to treat the basement suite as something that could be reassigned at any time, then the money she had been paying all those years was basically rent. I cannot explain how much that word bothered me. Tenant. Like she had been some stranger living downstairs instead of our daughter. Like we were landlords. I told her that was ridiculous and hurtful. She didn't really engage with that part, just said she was explaining how she had looked at the situation when she made her decision. That conversation ended quickly because I could feel myself getting angrier the longer it went on. A couple weeks later, something else started happening that made things even stranger. Groceries began showing up at the house. Not little things either. Big delivery orders. Boxes of diapers, formula, bulk food, and snacks for the toddler. At first, my wife thought maybe a relative had sent them, but then my daughter-in-law told us they were coming from our daughter, not to us, to her. Apparently, my daughter had started ordering groceries and supplies directly for the kids. Her exact message to my daughter-in-law was something like, "This is for the kids," which on the surface sounds generous. But the way it happened felt almost like she was deliberately cutting us out of the process. The boxes kept arriving, and every time one did, I had this strange mix of relief and resentment. Because yes, the help was useful, but it also felt like she was quietly saying she trusted her sister-in-law more than us to manage things. Around that time, my son tried talking to her again. He told her things were still rough and asked if she could maybe resume what she used to give us every month, just temporarily, until he found work again. Apparently, she shut that down pretty quickly. She told him she had already helped more than she was obligated to, and if he kept pushing, she would stop sending the deliveries as well. That did not go over well with him. But before the argument could escalate further, his wife stepped in and told him to drop it, right there in front of everyone. She said they were already receiving help and it would be stupid to risk losing it by fighting. I remember sitting there in the living room thinking it was a strange moment. My son is looking frustrated, his wife is trying to keep the peace, and the help we were getting coming from the one person who wasn't even living in the house anymore. Then things inside the house started shifting in ways. At first, my son kept saying this was temporary, just until he found another job. But slowly, small signs started appearing that suggested something else. A television got mounted downstairs in the basement suite, not just set up on a stand, mounted. Then more boxes got unpacked. Then shelves appeared. One afternoon, I overheard him and his wife talking about daycare options in the area if we're still here next year. I had been picturing a few months, maybe 6 at most. Suddenly it sounded like they were picturing something longer. Meanwhile, the house itself had changed. It's louder. There's always something happening. A baby crying. The toddler is running up and down the hallway. Doors opening and closing. Toys everywhere. I love my grandchildren, don't get me wrong, but I'm not a young man anymore. There's a reason quiet houses exist. Some nights I sit in the living room and realize I can't remember the last time the place felt calm. One afternoon, the toddler managed to knock over a small table upstairs and cracked one of the lamps my wife likes. Nobody got hurt, it was just kid chaos. But in the aftermath, I found myself thinking about how quiet things used to be when it was just my wife and me and our daughter living here. That thought made me uncomfortable, because it sounded like I was comparing them. But the comparison happened anyway. A few months passed like that. Groceries from our daughter would show up occasionally. Communication with her became sparse. Not hostile, just minimal. Then one day she sent a message in the family group chat saying she had signed a lease in another city closer to where she works. She said it would make her rotation schedule easier and cheaper than flying back and forth. When I told my wife, she got quiet in that way. That means she's angry but trying not to show it immediately. Later that night, she told me she thought I had mishandled the entire situation from the beginning. That if I had approached the conversation differently, our daughter might still be here. She said the house feels like it's coming apart, which I think is an exaggeration, but I understood what she meant. There's tension everywhere. Bills are higher, space feels tighter. And the person who used to quietly contribute the most financially is now living somewhere else entirely. That brings me to the part I'm still wrestling with. A few weeks ago, I decided to stop dancing around the issue. I called my daughter and asked her directly if she would be willing to contribute more financially to help the household while her brother gets back on his feet. No hints, no grocery talk. I asked for a number. There was a pause on the phone after I said it. Then she asked me what the plan was. Not the emotional plan, the financial one. How long her brother expected to stay, when he planned to start contributing, what expenses we were actually trying to cover. It felt less like a family conversation and more like a meeting. I told her she was making it sound like a business proposal. She said she needed clarity before committing to anything. In other words, conditions. I'm not used to my daughter talking to me that way. Like she's evaluating whether something makes sense for her instead of simply helping. I ended the call without agreeing to anything because the whole tone of the conversation felt wrong. But the truth is, the numbers keep coming back to me. The $1,800 she used to send every month covered a lot more than I realized. Groceries, utilities. Just the general breathing room of having an extra adult contributing. Without it, the house feels like it's running tighter than it used to. And every time I hear the baby crying at 3 in the morning or step on a toy in the hallway, I catch myself wondering if this is what the house is going to feel like for the next few years, which is not something I ever expected to be asking myself. I still don't understand why my daughter seems to have so much resentment towards us now. We raised her with love, we supported her, we welcomed her back into our home as an adult, and somehow along the way she started looking at us like landlords instead of parents. Follow-up. I didn't think I would write again, but the situation has changed in ways I didn't expect. When my son first moved into the basement, everyone agreed it would be temporary while he looked for work. Over time, I started realizing that his idea of temporary might be very different from mine. Little things made that clear. He began setting the space up like it was permanent. A television was mounted on the wall, shelves were installed, and more boxes kept getting unpacked. At one point, I overheard him talking with his wife about daycare options nearby if they were still living here next year. That was the first moment I started questioning how long this situation might actually last. At the same time, my daughter became more distant. Communication with her had already slowed down, but eventually it stopped completely. One afternoon, all 3 of us realized we had been blocked. Me, my wife, and my son. Just like that, contact ended. My son was furious about it and started venting about how selfish he thought she was for leaving the family when things became difficult. At some point during that conversation, he said something that turned the argument in a different direction. He said the entire situation wouldn't exist if I had handled things with her better in the beginning. That comment set me off. I told him that if we were going to start assigning blame, then the conversation wasn't going to stop with me. The discussion escalated quickly after that. He pointed out that he had 2 children and very limited options right now. I responded that our home was never meant to become a permanent solution. Eventually, I told him something that probably should have been said much earlier. If he was planning to treat the basement like his long-term home, then he needed to start making other arrangements. The room went completely quiet when I said that. My daughter-in-law didn't say anything. My wife also stayed silent. I could tell she wasn't happy about how the conversation was going, but she didn't step in. After that night, the atmosphere in the house changed. The tension was obvious, even when nobody was speaking about it directly. A few weeks later, my son and his family packed up and left. They didn't move far. They went to stay with relatives temporarily while he tries to get back on his feet. The move itself wasn't dramatic. It was just quick and uncomfortable. Once they were gone, the house became quiet again. But it isn't the kind of quiet I used to look forward to. It feels heavier. My wife barely speaks to me unless she has to. When she does, it's usually to say that I've managed to push both of our children away within the same year. Extended family has also started weighing in. Some people think I made the correct decision by setting boundaries with my son. Others believe I mishandled the entire situation from the beginning. Several relatives keep insisting that I should step in again because there are children involved. They keep reminding me that my grandchildren are caught in the middle of all of this. I understand their concern, but after the last year, I reached a point where I realized something. I spent months trying to solve problems that weren't actually mine to fix. Both of my children are adults now. I raised them, supported them growing up, and did what I could to help them start their own lives. At some point, their decisions and circumstances became their responsibility. If people want to call that selfish, I can accept that. But I can't keep rearranging my life every time someone else's situation falls apart. Right now, neither of my children speaks to me. My wife is angry most of the time. Some relatives avoid inviting us anywhere because they don't want to deal with the tension. The house I spent decades paying for is quiet again. And I still find myself wondering how a single decision about a basement suite ended up unraveling everything like this. Because whatever people think of me now, this isn't how I expected things to turn out. Analysis. This story is interesting because it looks like a simple family fight, but the real issue underneath it is structure, specifically money, housing, and control inside families. The father keeps framing everything emotionally. In his mind, the house was always a family home. The basement suite was never really his daughter's space, and the payments she made were just a form of helping out. From that perspective, asking her to move rooms so her brother's family could stay there felt reasonable. But the structure he built doesn't match the story he tells himself about it. The daughter was paying $1,800 a month. That isn't casual help. That's a fixed, predictable housing payment. Once money like that starts moving consistently, the relationship between the people involved changes whether anyone says it out loud or not. A person paying that amount every month is not functioning like a child living at home. They're functioning like an adult occupant paying for space. The father never adjusted his mindset to that reality. He continued thinking of the basement suite as something he could reassign whenever family needs changed. That's the contradiction that broke the arrangement. From the daughter's point of view, the situation became very clear the moment she was told to give up the suite. She had been paying a housing level amount, but the space itself wasn't secure. It could be reassigned immediately when someone else needed it more. At that point, the arrangement stopped making sense financially. Her reaction wasn't dramatic. She didn't escalate the argument or try to negotiate rights to the suite. She simply recalculated her situation and left. What makes the story unusual is the way she handled the transition. Instead of scrambling for a new apartment right away, she realized something practical. During her weeks off work, all-inclusive resorts cost less than what she had been paying at home. That's a detail that really shifts the dynamic. It means the financial arrangement she had with her parents wasn't just inconvenient, it was objectively worse than other options available to her. So the moment the security of the living space disappeared, the economic logic of staying disappeared too. Meanwhile, the father's household had already started adjusting itself around her $1,800 contribution. That's something people often underestimate in family situations. Once a regular payment becomes part of the household budget, it quietly turns into structural support. When that support disappears, the entire system feels unstable. That's exactly what happened here. Grocery bills went up, utilities increased with another family in the house, and suddenly, the daughter's former contribution started looking like the financial foundation of the household. At the same time, the brother's situation was becoming more permanent than anyone initially expected. Small signs began appearing, furniture getting installed, boxes being unpacked, conversations about daycare and schools. Those kinds of details signal something important. Temporary arrangements have a tendency to quietly become long-term ones. Inside the house, the atmosphere shifted as well. A home that had become quiet again after the children grew up suddenly returned to the noise and unpredictability of raising young kids. That change alone can create a lot of tension for people who thought they were entering a calmer stage of life. The father's reaction over time shows a pattern that appears in many family conflicts involving adult children. He tried to pull the situation back towards the structure he was comfortable with. He asked for financial help again. He argued that the basement was never really hers. He focused on the fact that the furniture and space technically belonged to the parents. But those arguments only make sense if the arrangement was purely family support. Once regular payments were involved, those arguments stopped carrying the same weight. The daughter recognized that earlier than anyone else in the story. Her later decision to sign a lease near her work completes the shift. At that point, she isn't negotiating with the family structure anymore. She has replaced it entirely with a new one that makes more sense for her life and schedule. The father ends up in a difficult position after that. The son's family becomes more dependent on the house than originally planned. The daughter has built her independence somewhere else, and the household that once functioned around predictable roles no longer has those roles in place. What started as a practical decision about a basement suite ultimately exposed something deeper. The family had been operating with two different understandings of the same arrangement. The father believed it was a flexible family system where space and money could shift depending on who needed help most. The daughter treated it like a stable housing arrangement supported by a monthly payment. As long as both sides believed their version, the system worked. The moment those assumptions collided, the entire structure collapsed.